WWE is so wealthy nowadays that it is literally incapable at this point of making dumb decisions because there are no consequences to them. In any other paradigm, the formation of NXT UK is a dumb decision. WWE loses money just by operating it. Then there's putting Shane McMahon everywhere. That doesn't sound like a good idea. Ah well, let me wipe away those smarky tears with my oodles of cash. And finally, satisfying conclusions to feuds? Ah, who needs that bollocks? Others, though, aren't so lucky. I'm Adam Wilborn from What Culture, and these are the 10 dumbest decisions in wrestling history. Number 10. Verne Gagne refuses to believe in Hulkamania. Owner and promoter of the American Wrestling Association, Verne Gagne was hesitant to push Hulk Hogan as the face and heavyweight champion of the company. He won the title in April of 1982, but this dusty finish was retconned 6 days later. Gagne, himself a legitimate athlete and traditional grappler, resisted Hogan's demonstrable star power under his rigid and soon-to-be unfashionable philosophy. You keep telling yourself that it's the children who are wrong, Verne. Where Vince's father felt his role in Rocky III, the best movie ever, Fight Me, undermined his credibility, Vince was astute enough to realize that the opposite was true and that Hogan was the perfect vehicle with which to cross over into the mainstream. Under Vince Jr.'s new vision, Hogan was an ideal candidate precisely because he wasn't a traditional-looking wrestler. Brother. Number 9. WCW hires Jim Herd. Much like spiritual descendant TNA, WCW was cursed forever by piss-poor management. Pizza Hut manager Jim Herd, serving as executive vice president because, he knew somebody, steadily reimagined WCW as an ersatz version of the competition. Ric Flair was deemed old hat by Herd, who had the idea to repackage him as Spartacus, a gladiator born before Christ depicted in a 1960 historical Hollywood epic. Jesus. This WWF light proto-Russo, we'll get to him, approach manifested not as warped meta crap, but totally risible gimmicks even Vince wouldn't have deemed such good shit. Herd didn't kill the promotion, but his reign divorced it from its traditions. And through subversion or pathetic imitation of the WWF, it never again retained its true identity. Number 8. Vince McMahon retires Randy Savage. Vince McMahon has this weird and contradictory thing about age. We haven't even got time to talk about women in this entry. Imagine that. Despite consistently enabling the 50-year-old Triple H to silence WrestleMania crowds in increasingly laborious parody epics and endangering his legends in the draining heat of Saudi Arabia, he sends aging on-screen personnel out to pasture if he deems them to look too old. The most obvious example, of course, being himself. Well, unless he needs to pop a rating. In 1993, Vince relegated Macho Man Randy Savage to a commentary role and then eventually let him leave. Dumb in how contradictory it all was, it was also very dumb in ramification. Savage joined WCW, in which he drew and elevated DDP to the main event in awesome, furious brawls. Vince's inconsistent whims weaponized his competition, a decision that in no small part led to the most barren financial period his company ever endured. Number 7. Lance Von Erich. Texans are inherently proud, and the home state heroes, the Von Erichs, fulfilled that pride. Athletic and tough enough for the guys and handsome enough for the girls, Kerry would often get off with women when making his ring entrance. Their collective star power and babyface values elevated them as mega draws. Until the strange and awful family curse, or the grim inevitability of lives lived at midnight, struck. David had died in 1984 at the height of the seminal Von Erichs vs. Fabulous Freebirds rivalry. His replacement in those wars, Mike, suffered toxic shock syndrome following shoulder surgery. Since Chris was woefully, tragically unsuited to the business, it got to him too in the end, and a new Von Erich brother, Lance, was manufactured in wildly unpopular defiance of what made what was barely an act work. Fans smelled the bullshit immediately and hated the stench. This accelerated a perhaps inevitable demise, as did Fritz von Erich's faked heart attack, a disgusting act of plausible manipulation. The gritty, localized promotion, a close and hugely popular approximation of sport boasting a lineage traced from high school football, but yes, also Kamala, devolved into fake carny bollocks. Number 6. Inokiism. The founder of New Japan Pro Wrestling also almost destroyed it. He injected New Japan with a lethal dose of, well, MMA fighters who absolutely pasted and irrevocably damaged pro wrestlers. Inoki recognized the rise of mixed martial arts in the East, a genre of real combat that seduced his sensibilities of legitimacy. But there was already, well, bloody mixed martial arts for that. The trained killers were always going to annihilate the trained performers in the fighters versus wrestlers shoots. This astonishingly stupid mentality contradicted everything about the company. The wrestlers always presented as the real tough guys were, in fact, pretenders. But there was still wrestling to enjoy. Wrestling matches between MMA fighters who were abysmal at wrestling. Wrestling fans hated watching their heroes look like weaklings, and any prospective MMA fans already had MMA, which was thriving, and the MMA fights in New Japan were predictably one-sided destructions, wholly lacking in technique and drama. Everybody hated all of this, except Inoki, who looked at the busted noses of his wrestling talent and said, "That's good shit." Number 5. WCW hires Vince Russo. WCW was already in deep and perhaps irreversible decline, but it degenerated from competitor to copycat with relentless speed from late 1999 onwards, and Russo is chiefly to blame because, well, of course he bloody is. Titles meant nothing because the top title changed hands on a twice-per-month basis in 2000. It was claimed by a guy who had absolutely no business stepping foot in a wrestling ring. And David Arquette. On no less than 4 occasions, the WCW World Heavyweight title was vacated because the winner didn't even want it. Everything meant nothing because everything was presented as fake, apart from the angles that were really real. What a bellend. Number 4. The new Monday Night War. It's probably for the best that, thus far, Eric Bischoff appears to have done nothing since being hired as an executive director in WWE. His vision for TNA was beyond putrid. Defined by lazy hubris, Bischoff, in league with Hulk Hogan, and what could possibly go wrong here, performed nothing in the way of creative due diligence. They didn't make an effort to understand what worked for the existing fan base and instead imposed an ancient-feeling product on them to disastrous effect. TNA became WWE Light in the process, or more accurately, WWF Light. The Nasty Boys stunk up pay-per-view as if it were an airport and not a platform for which to draw money from a current fan base. And attempts were even made to get the band back together. AJ Styles wasn't enough of a star and so was dressed up as Ric Flair, as if his robe possessed magical powers. Woo! Astonishingly, Hogan's WWE Hall of Fame ring actually did possess magical powers. Abyss became a better wrestler by wearing an achievement in earnest awarded by the competition. It was with this outrageously crappy product, pathetically indebted to the godlike competition, that TNA launched a war against them on Monday nights. It did not work. Number 3. TNA embarrasses Kazuchika Okada. As is tradition, in 2010, New Japan Pro Wrestling sent Kazuchika Okada on excursion to TNA. Kazuchika sodding Okada. Just bear that in mind. The mentality behind the excursion is as astute as it is simple. The young lion learns a new style and new tactics with which to connect to a new and different audience. They return, renewed and developed in an accepted phase of their progression as a name act. Tetsuya Naito developed his aloof, ungovernable, no persona in defiance of racist abuse in Mexico, and stablemate Hiromu Takahashi added a lunatic bent to his game by intensifying the dives he learned in the same country. In TNA, Okada was hidden under an eye mask inspired by a 1960s TV show and booked to win by humiliating disqualifications in less than a minute. TNA's treatment of Okada enraged New Japan into severing their agreement. Okada, meanwhile, a genius, developed into something loftier than that through genius booker Gedo's outraged determination. A Japanese promotion subsequently overtook the US-based TNA as the second biggest promotion in America in a swerve so outrageous, even Russo couldn't have conceived it. Number 2. The All Japan Board of Executives back Motoko Baba over Mitsuharu Misawa. The death of Giant Baba spelled the end of his company All Japan Pro Wrestling as a big-time proposition. Baba's passing sparked a divide between his widow Motoko and incumbent president and ace Mitsuharu Misawa, who were in conflict over the direction of the company. Motoko was bound by tradition. Misawa, meanwhile, sensed a shift in the mentality of the audience and, under the belief that All Japan required a production and aesthetic overhaul, pitched a new direction that would ultimately materialize a year and a half later as Pro Wrestling Noah. All Japan's board of executives removed him from his role as president, and Misawa, in response, formed Noah and took the vast majority of a locker room that idolized him on the ship. He also commandeered All Japan's TV slot, resulting in the company's unrecoverable decline. Number 1. ROH funds All In. Last year's seminal game-changing All In pay-per-view was pitched as an underdog celebration of independent wrestling and manifested proof of how big it really is. But it wasn't all that independent. Don't at me. It was funded in no small part by Ring of Honor. Per more recent reports, All Elite Wrestling was in the works before the show, but the success of it convinced influential figures in the TV industry that WWE's monopoly was more vulnerable than anybody thought. The formation of AEW led to the departure of Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. ROH, lacking the star power and imagination to replace them, essentially ceded their biggest draws and fan base to the competition. Whoops! Incompetence, charity, whatever you want to call it, in taking the reverse Vince McMahon approach, ROH doomed itself. And that's our list. Did we miss any out? Let us know in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts. Plus, you can check out more recent videos here. Thanks for watching. I've been Adam from What Culture, and I'll see you soon.